So yesterday, Jeremy Hunt unveiled what could well be his final budget as Chancellor. So in this video, we're going to be going through some of the key details, some of my hot takes, and one of my really controversial takes. So let's get into it. But to some degree, he must be absolutely raging at Baron Cameron of Chipping Norton, an artist formerly known as David Cameron. I'm going to be as even-handed as I can because there is, I think, one really important thing which has flown below the radar, which I do think is important and I also want to get into. I decided it's like getting an electric chair for Christmas, but stick with me on this one. So the first is taxation. So the rate of national insurance has fallen again. It's gone from 12p to 10p and now from 10p down to 8p. I think it's also worth stating the bleeding obvious at this point, but it's by no means enough to try and offset the overall fiscal drag that people getting pulled into higher income tax brackets. The Institute for Fiscal Studies has basically come out with this statistic where for every pound of national insurance cuts, there's still £1.30 that people have lost out on when it comes to the fiscal drag and the tax bands having been frozen. So people are still no better off than they were in spite of all these tax cuts. Now, Keir Starmer did point out that the tax burden hasn't been this high for 70 years and it's forecast to only increase. And by next year, the tax burden won't have been this high for nearly 80 years. But they continue with these national insurance rises and damn the torpedoes. So I wish they'd talk us through their thinking on this one. So the NonDon Tax status is very arcane and is really a relic of a time gone by. But what this basically means is that someone can officially reside in the UK, but through some link, generally it's I think their father having been born outside the UK, they can not pay any income tax on their income that's generated overseas, and they will only pay it on income generated in the UK. Now this is an insane way to manage anyone's finances, and the fact that this loophole hasn't been closed sooner is nuts. Insane. Really wacky stuff. Now we should also point out at this stage that this was something that Labour had planned to do, so good old slipped in real quick there. But we should also say that they've just announced that they're going to scrap it. They've said that it will be replaced with a more modern, fairer and more balanced system. So until we actually can see the details, I think this is bullshit. Like, it's absolutely meaningless, and then until we find out what the replacement system is going to look like, whatever. It's a whole load of whatever, basically. Now at this point, obviously, Keir Starmer should have flamed him with a blitzkrieg of absolute zingers, but Comrade Keir kind of didn't in this case. ISAs. Now, there had been rampant speculation for well over a year in some cases that ISAs were going to be reformed somehow. And so what they've done is they've revealed the Great British ISA, which sounds like a famous cake baking show, but no legal action necessary. So what is this? It's basically a £5,000 allowance that goes on top of your £20,000 ISA allowance. Now, personally, this feels like kind of a hot take. It's bullshit, really. I looked up some of the statistics and only around 6% of UK adults even have an ISA. Now, my view is that is largely down to people not being able to access financial education. So if you want to access financial education, subscribe for more content because we've got loads coming. The number of people who actually maximise their ISA allowance of £20,000 a year is less than half of that. So we are talking very, very small numbers of people who are even hitting the £20,000 threshold. So at this point, I'm sure you're legitimately asking, well, what's another £5,000 going to be? And to be honest, that's the question I've got. What's the point of this? And the truth of the matter is, if you maximise your ISA allowance, then that's a good thing, but it just feels like we are so many steps away from actually this being useful and making a material difference that I don't think it's all it's cracked up to be. And I think it's kind of a waste of time. You know, this is just some kind of devilish shit. Benefits and income support. So, they have done it. So the way this system had worked, and this is something that not all heroes wear capes, Martin Lewis certainly doesn't, and he is a bloody hero, an absolute national treasure, so kudos to him for having campaigned on this for as long as he did. But basically the situation is this: if any member of a household or in a couple earns over £50,000, then they lost their child benefit allowance. And so what it meant is that you could have someone who made £50,000 or £51,000, someone who made, and they are married to someone who made £10,000, and they would lose that allowance. But you could have two people in the same household make £49,000 and still have full access. Now, the government have done one good thing, which is they've raised this allowance from £50,000 to £60,000. Now, it has been fixed since about 2013, and so if you adjust that £50,000 from 2013 for inflation, it should be £68,000. So we're starting to see a cycle here, frankly, which is that they are increasing some of these allowances, but not by what it would have been in order to keep up with inflation. In my view, they should have at least increased it to the 68,000 so it kept pace with inflation, but no matter. Housing. So this is one which, again, is completely misguided, I would have said. So the capital gains on the profits that you make from selling a property have gone down from 28% to 24%. Now, we should be very clear that there are two rates for this. If you're a high rate taxpayer, it's gone down from 28% to 24%. But if you're not a high rate taxpayer, then it's still fixed at 18%. So all these like ghoulish landlords, like this one, but all these like landlords who are selling their houses are basically going to pay less in capital gains tax. So, you know, for the most part, this is kind of a giveaway for wealthy landowners more than anyone else. This is not for your average Joes. Jeremy Hunt also said he was going to get rid of the stamp duty relief for people buying multiple properties after he had taken advantage of it for himself. Now, we should also be really clear that he made this accusation against Angela Rayner from the Labour Party. He has more properties and he has taken advantage of the very same relief he criticised her for, so fuck that guy. Maybe. I don't know that they've shown any great deal of analysis in order to back that up, so jury's out. But this is the thing that not many people are talking about and I think has really managed to fly under the radar. So, the government has also said that they're going to continue to explore a pension pot for life. So, let's just go through how it works at the moment. You go to work for Company A, Company B and Company C over, let's say, a 10-year period. Each individual one will have separate pension schemes, they'll have separate pension contributions, separate products, separate pension providers, and it can all get mind-bogglingly complicated. Now, what you can do at the moment is you can speak to all of your individual pension providers and you can group all your pensions into a single product. So I personally have collected all my pensions from all my previous employers and put them into my own SIP, a self-invested personal pension, which I have with Vanguard. Very complicated, very annoying, and means tons and tons of admin paperwork. And admin paperwork is bullshit, as we know on this channel. So what would a pension pot for life be? Well, basically what you would do is when you start a job, you would say, hey, I've already got this pension pot and I want you to make all my pension contributions to it. Now, what it means is that, and hence the pension pot for life name, what it means is that you could basically go from Company A to Company B to Company C and not have to do any of that admin. And it is estimated that there are 3 million unclaimed pension pots in the UK. 3 million of them, which is just an insane number. 3 million pension pots is a lot. And one of the other things, which we should definitely do a video on, subscribe so you don't miss it, is a lot of the default pension schemes that people get put into, which they can't necessarily opt into, are kind of medium risk, they can tend to have higher fees, and the effect on fees on pension pots is something that we talk about and have talked about a lot on this channel, but the cost can be absolutely stratospheric, so it's something to bear in mind. So I think this is actually, I'm going to give old Jezza an A+ on this one. It's a good idea and I really hope that after the consultation period is over, it's something that they actually decide to implement. So what's my take on all this? Well, I thought about this for a little while and I decided it's like getting an electric chair for Christmas. But stick with me on this one. So whilst it is always nice to receive a gift, it's a weird thing to get as a gift. See what I mean? So here's a good example. A lot of these changes to national insurance are not necessarily even offsetting the increased tax that people are paying by having been dragged into higher marginal tax thresholds. So it's just like, why could you not have rectified that? This is quite obviously an election giveaway. This is designed to put more money in people's pockets so that when they go to the polls, the government has got its fingers crossed that people will feel as though the economy is getting better, even if it's just a bit of a temporary sugar high. Now, we have got a whole series of videos talking about the UK economy, its comparison to international competitors, post-Brexit, post-financial crisis, and you go through the list of things that we've discussed where we've itemised, you know, say a lack in productivity, and what we've basically found is that there is nothing in this budget that will ultimately affect some of those core problems, some of the real building blocks, foundational problems which the economy is facing. So let's take low productivity. Productivity in the UK has basically flatlined since the financial crisis. There's nothing in there for increasing funding for getting people onto training courses. There is just nothing there, and that would be a really good and positive step in the right direction in order to solve one of the biggest problems that the economy ultimately faces. But I think one thing which I imagine most people are pissed off about, and maybe there's some polling data to back this up, as we talked about, the tax burden hasn't been this high in 70 years and it's only going to get higher. And in the next couple of years it will get the highest it's been in 80 years. And what we generally find is that people are paying more in taxes, but public services have never been worse by some metrics. It doesn't matter if you look at NHS waiting lists or transportation or the state of the roads or the RAC in schools. People feel as though they're paying all this money in taxes, which is absolutely true. You know, no vibes going on here, like verifiable fact. They're paying all this money in taxes and their public services have never performed worse. And so here's an interesting survey that came out a few years ago, and it basically said that people would be prepared to pay more in income tax. I think they asked people like 1 or 2% more in income tax if they could be guaranteed that that money was going to go to the NHS. So whilst people, I wouldn't say like it, but people are more comfortable paying more in taxes provided it goes on what they think their spending priorities are for the country. So, you know, what do I rate this budget overall? Like a D minus. There's some really good stuff in there. The pension pot for life I think is a really good idea. I generally am in favour of the child benefit changes, but I think the real change won't come until 2026. But for the most part, it's tinkering around the edges and it doesn't deal with a lot of the fundamental issues that the economy faces ultimately. Please like and subscribe. Peace.